There's just something about the title of this one, A Natural History of Dragons, that had me immediately interested. Couple that with the cover, where you see like a dragon being diagrammed, and I'm like, okay, this is definitely worth checking out. Hello and welcome to my channel. In this video, we will be talking about A Natural History of Dragons by Marie Brennan. And like I said in the intro, is one that just, I was so curious to see what this was going to be like because it seems like a pretty unique idea for a series of books. And I would say that it definitely matches that. This is kind of like an 1800s-y type of setup in this probably, like England style place. A lot of things are pretty normal, except for the fact that dragons are very real and they're just actual creatures, and there's something we don't know a ton about because they can be dangerous, but they're well known. Like they'll be in a menagerie, people will hunt them. There's all these things going on, and so kind of like this fantasy world that has a lot of things that feel similar to ours, but with just the addition of dragons, more modern, and having somebody who's interested in studying them. And that is, I think, a very winning premise. I at least haven't read anything really quite like this before, and so that really had me pulled in and very interested. It definitely feels like that kind of thing, which I'm like the old school, like, I don't know, almost like Jane Austen-y type of thing, which I've not read, so I'm more so talking about what I'm assuming. Has kind of that feel to an extent with that setup, but is going in some really interesting directions with it overall. We have our main character, the Lady Isabella, who has an obsession with dragons that's deemed very unladylike, but ends up meeting a man who's also very interested in scholarship and willing to accept her. And then from there, they end up going on some adventures together to learn more about dragons. And so those parts of it, kind of learning about dragons, talking about it, I actually found really interesting. And that's what really pulled me in to begin with. My main complaint with this one is it kind of leaned a little bit more into some other aspects that I was just really less interested in. Partway through, we start to look at this kind of mystery going on, and evolves more into a conspiracy. But like the base mystery element, I just felt very weak, and I thought was handled kind of clumsily because it was like really obvious what was going on, and exactly what when you read it, exactly what you assume is going on is going on. And so it's just like, oh yeah, okay, and it's used to kind of bridge it into this bigger conspiracy. But I just like, I don't really care. That part did not engage me at all, and so kind of brought down my enjoyment of the book because I'm just like, I'm not really caring about this. With finding, I just want to go more look at dragons and find out more of this stuff and have the adventures with it. And those parts I thought were interesting, just kind of looking at it from a scholarship part, but in this story, somebody who's really trying to learn about dragons and having it be something they really know very little about. And so it also, through that, establishes more information and lore about the dragons, and I'm always interested in finding out more about dragons. And this, like I said, is a really different approach to it. I think it's kind of cool. This, of course, it is the memoir of Lady Trent, is being written by the main character as they are much older now, and so they're recounting things from way earlier in their life. And we do start with the main character being pretty young, and then the kind of go through their first adventure. So you also get tidbits and bits of information where it's like, oh, I previously wrote this book and now I don't agree with it, or this is what we thought at the time, now we know better. And so I think that also made it interesting because it allows the author to immediately go in and be like, this is what we thought at the time, but you get that additional information. So it allows you to advance kind of with learning more about the dragons and without really having it feel info dumpy, because it's done all through the narrative because it is a memoir. And so that way that it was done, and little tidbits that kind of tell you things that may come later, I thought was handled really well with it. So like I said, the actual natural history of dragons portions, really enjoyed. The kind of mystery conspiracy parts I did not enjoy nearly as much, and so that brought it down for me. I landed about 3 stars here with it, even though I did like the book overall. There were just some parts that I was less into. I will say I did do some audio of this along with the physical book. A lot of it I did audio. It is narrated by Kate Redding using a British accent instead of the one I'm used to hearing her, which is her kind of Southern American accent she uses for Wheel of Time. And So that actually I really liked. Even if you're not much of a Kate Redding fan, I feel like this with the more natural sounding accent from her versus the one she normally uses for most things, I thought it worked really well, and it did feel like the perfect narrator choice for this. Her being she's not super old, but her being a little bit older as well, and doing the kind of refined British kind of accent is just the period feel of this book really, really well. And I thought just fit the character also really well. And for the memoir format worked really well for me too. So I do recommend the audio if you're going to check this out. I quite enjoyed it. Although you do get a lot of illustrations in here, so that's kind of the problem. And so that's why I started it on audio, and I'm like, I should probably do kind of a mix, because if I can find one. Like, here's an example. There's an illustration of a dragon, and there's like the little pullouts where they're showing like, oh, here's what we were looking at here and there. And so the illustrations, I think, are cool and worth checking out as well for that sort of thing. So kind of one of those things where I'm torn, because I'd like to see the illustrations. At the same time, I only have the first book physically, and my library has the rest of the whole series on audio, and so that's probably what I'll do. I'll have to see, maybe we have ebooks too, so that I could like do both or something similar with it. But overall, pretty enjoyable. Interesting enough. One I do plan to continue. It's not going to be super high priority, but I'm pulled in enough and engaged enough in the premise, even though there were some parts that I found to be a bit weaker in this book, that I'm planning to continue at some point. I have heard that overall it does improve the further you get into the series, so definitely willing to give it the benefit of the doubt and keep going, because it was something I liked enough to continue, even though this one was kind of more middling for me overall, taking in all of those pieces. But that's kind of where I landed on this one as a whole. So let me know your thoughts if you've read this series or this first one even on this one. Like I said, I found it really interesting, so I'd be interested to see what other people think. I know from talking in Discord, some people who have really loved this series, at least, so I know that there's some out there, but always interested to hear your thoughts. And then, of course, if you enjoyed this video, make sure to give it a like. Check the link in the description, as always, for the Wizardly Do It Discord. If you want to chat books, whether this book, other books, any books, really anything at all, it is a lot of fun, and we'd love to have you. And, of course, if you enjoy my content, make sure to subscribe.